so that I would probably have been a far more peaceful person as well. And the third thing that would have changed in my life, without any doubt, is I would have been far less selfish. Because selfishness arises from a thought that there's something I need in particular. And thank you, in this moment right now, if you please, in order for me to be happy, healthy, and fine. And only as I've gotten older, and of course gone through this wonderful Conversations with God experience, has it been made clear to me that there's nothing that I need to be happy, healthy, and fine. But the real challenge is to make sure that everyone whose life I touch is happy, healthy, and fine, because they don't know that. And I now do.
Mm-hmm.
So if I knew at 29 what I know now, I would probably have moved through the world in a far less selfish and self-serving way, which would in turn have eliminated an enormous amount of hurt that I've inflicted upon the world in terms of other people's feelings and how they've experienced their lives.
Annabelle wants to know, what is the one key thing that she or anyone can do to shift into a better place?
Tell the truth to everyone about everything all the time. And understand that your life is not about you, Annabelle. It has nothing to do with you. It is about everyone whose life you touch. And that to the degree that you imagine your life is about you, to that degree you will be self-concerned. Nothing wrong with that. I mean, it's not a moral wrong. It simply isn't the most beneficial way to achieve self-awareness and what some people call enlightenment. To say nothing of a simple, peaceful, happy, and serene life and passage through this thing that we call physicalization while we are on the planet. So, Annabelle, the answer to your question is what I've just said. And be gentle with yourself as you undertake these ideas of always telling the truth and of understanding that you are not really the center of your universe. In fact, that everything that you ever could possibly need at any given moment has already been given to you. It's now simply a question of putting it to its highest and best use, which in the end has nothing to do with you and everything to do with everyone else. Now, finally, I would say, Annabelle, that the irony of that is, when we live that way, all the things we thought we had to struggle for come falling in on us without effort.
Another listener, Cheryl, asked, what is the best way to teach this information to others?
By not trying to. If you try to teach other people things, you are implanting, even if you're successful, knowledge. Knowledge is data about the world and understanding of the world that's given to us through someone else or something else, a book or some other source. Wisdom, on the other hand, is quite different. Wisdom is the experience of coming to a conclusion that is deeply and uniquely and singularly our own. So the difference between wisdom and knowledge is like night and day. Therefore, the best way to teach other people this material is not to attempt to teach it at all, but simply to live it to the best of your ability. And people will simply observe you and the way your life is lived and how you are experiencing life. And if you're experiencing life in a way that seems to be more peaceful, more serene, more joyful than some other people, folks will come up to you and ask you, what is it that you know that I don't seem to understand? Because you always seem to be at a level of peace and serenity. Not that your life doesn't have any challenges, but you just seem to, even in the moments of challenge, you seem to negotiate those challenges more smoothly and to keep moving forward more serenely. What is it? What is it that you know that I don't know? And that's a time not to teach, but to simply share your own personal experience gently and sweetly, and then to announce that the other person who's asking you these questions is invited and always given the eternal opportunity by life itself to move through the same kind of encounter with their own inner wisdom. Always directing the other person to their own inner wisdom, rather than shining what you assume to be your wisdom upon them. And that is what I try to do in my life. For instance, I wouldn't even be having this interview if you weren't asking me these questions. I have zero need to say these things to anybody. But you've called and you've asked.
Nelson wants to know if you have any thoughts on the 2012 projected changes.
Well, my question would be, does Nelson? Because Nelson's thoughts are the experiences Nelson is going to have, not mine. So my thoughts are irrelevant in that context. I would invite Nelson to decide in his own mind what those changes are going to be about, how they're going to be experienced, how they're going to be negotiated and moved through by the person known as Nelson. And when he decides that, rather than, and I don't want to assume he's doing this, but as a for instance, when he decides that, rather than, for instance, looking outside of himself to see what someone else has to think about it, then he puts himself in the place where God has always wanted him to be, in the place of pure creation, in the power seat, in the driver's seat, if you will. And he gets to have the experience of those changes that he would seek and choose to have, rather than the experience that's being created by the collective consciousness of everyone else except him. Which is how most of us live our lives.
How can we change the world?
By not trying to, but by simply changing ourselves. A changed self will change the world. Because you cannot possibly move through the world as a new human without the world shifting around you by the very fact of your being in it. It's been said that if Christ were alive today and walked on a battlefield between two warring armies, that the armies on both sides would lay down their arms instantly at just simply his appearance. Not, by the way, because they recognize him as Jesus. Maybe he could even wear some kind of disguise or they wouldn't know who he was, but just by his very presence, by the energy that he brings to the space. It would be impossible for people to stand in conflict of each other in the space of that kind of energy, that kind of unconditional acceptance and unconditional love. So the answer is to not try to change the world overtly, but to simply seek to change oneself. Now, that does not mean that we may not want to do things in the world that can improve the world's experience of itself. That does mean to do it for an entirely different reason. I work actively with many organizations to try to, as you put it, to use your phrase, change the world. But my motivation is not to try to change the world. Motivation is to try to express myself at the next highest level, to recreate myself anew in the next grandest version of the greatest vision ever I held about who I am. And as I seek to use my outside world as one of many tools, as well as my inside world as another tool, with which to do that, to that extent, the outside world does seem to be once in a while affected and impacted by human beings moving through it in that particular way.
Is there such a thing as collective consciousness manifesting?
Of course there's collective consciousness. It demonstrates itself and it manifests itself all around us. So the answer to that question is a simple yes. And its evidence is in appearance everywhere. But collective consciousness is shifted by individual consciousnesses that have shifted. That's the point I was making. You go out there and try to change collective consciousness, you got a pretty big meal on your plate. You seek to change your own consciousness, and the collective consciousness of those around you will begin to shift and change as well, and then those around them, and then those around them, and then by a factor of 6, you know how that is. And before we know it, like ink on a blotter, we've created critical mass. And that's what all masters ultimately do. And nobody sets out to change 6 million minds, but people seek to shift the collective experience of humanity by changing their own particular experience, and in doing so, almost like a virus, like an idea virus, infecting, if you please, the rest of humanity with a healing serum that causes its deepest wounds to be closed at last. What's next, to answer your last question, is a book that I'm writing. It's called When Everything Changes, Change Everything, and it will be available from the publishers in May.
Oh, great. Any final words?
No, you're asking the questions.
Okay. Neale, I can't thank you enough for being here today. You are truly a shining light on the path of so many on this planet. And talk about gratitude. I'm so grateful to have had this opportunity to share with you today. And ladies and gentlemen, look for Neale's website, neale.walsch.com. The website is stellar. Go take a look at it. And Neale, I look forward to more enlightenment. Thanks again.
Well, you're very generous.
Appreciate it.
Very, very kind in your comments. Not sure I'm able to live up to that standard, but it was nice of you to say those things. And it was nice to be here with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, folks, this is Tom Murasso from BornToManifest.com signing out. Peace out, and we love you.